I'd like to recognize Councilmember Lancman.
Hey, good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
I want to ask you about the juvenile probationers and what seems to be a significant or certainly very noticeable increase in their rearrest rate and the average monthly violation rate for juvenile probationers. So for juvenile probationers, the average monthly violation rate went from 2.4% to 3.1% fiscal year 13 to fiscal year 14, and the juvenile probationer rearrest rate, the monthly average percentage, went from 2.6% to 3.4%. Those are very significant statistical increases. And I'm assuming that part of the justification for that, or part of the reason for that, is that the department introduced a new risk and needs instrument for juveniles, resulting in an increased rate of high-risk youth receiving a probation sentence. Right. So can you tell me about the increase in the rates, what you see the cause for them is, whether or not they are tied to the increase in high-risk youth receiving probation as opposed to another sentence or placement, and how, if those two are tied, we can justify increasing the number of high-risk youth receiving probation if it's going to mean such an increase in the rearrest rate.
Okay. So there's a number of layers on that. Part of the way of thinking about it is to also look at the arrest rates and the distribution of felony arrests and misdemeanor arrests. Over time, the number of misdemeanor arrests for juveniles has been decreasing, right? So now the ratio of felony to misdemeanors is more even, right? So that also
meaning there used to be more misdemeanor arrests, felonies,
yes,
and now they're
now they're almost 50-50, right? So that also means that is a proxy, if you will, for higher risk youth coming into the system in the first place. And so that's what's happening.
Sorry to interrupt, but
right?
I asked you a very complicated question, which I apologize for. The alternative was a one question in 6 parts. So hopefully you appreciate my effort to try to put it all together.
No problem.
But
ultimately the answer is what you stated.
But have they evened out misdemeanors and felonies because there have been fewer misdemeanors or more felonies?
Fewer misdemeanor arrests.
Okay.
Right. The felony rate has not increased.
Okay, so go ahead.
Okay. So the misdemeanor in part is some initiatives of the police department, and others have been changes in the pattern of behavior. But the simplest answer is what you stated. So then we have higher risk youth in our midst, so that the rate may go up, and what we're doing is constantly analyzing to make sure that those are not felony arrests or violent felony arrests, and in fact the vast majority of the rearrests are misdemeanors. And so in misdemeanors you've got, for example, arrest for marijuana possession. So if you've got kids who are a combination of higher risk and come in with substance abuse issues, you might see that pattern. You might see a rearrest on that or two until they're ready, and engaged in treatment, right? So these figures have to be then analyzed as to, a little more depth in terms of risk and types of offenses that you see.
Would you agree, though, that if we are placing more youth or assessing more high-risk youth, and they're getting probation sentences, and there is a very significant increase in the rearrest rate, that maybe we need to tweak in a significant way the assessment of these youth and whether or not they should be getting probation as opposed to some other placement?
So
I mean, the simple terms for simple kid from Queens like me is we're letting people out and walk the streets who based on the statistics, demonstrably shouldn't be.
Well, the part of the premise is whether this is significant or not, right? And then what types of rearrests we're seeing. and part of the effort we're having, and then we'll see what the trends say, is the differentiated caseloads, so that we need to invest more resources and into the higher risk youth, and that's where we've been going, and so that's what we've been seeing. And since this is the first time that we see that blip, we need to keep our eye on it and then analyze it as we continue. I am not worried right now in the sense of what I've seen and what our researchers are, telling us about the pattern of reoffending. It's like I said before.
Why isn't it worrisome to you that kids, juveniles are in the system, they're arrested, and their assessment that they're assessed as being high risk, they're being put out in probation, they're violating their probation? Like, why isn't that worrisome to you?
Well, I may have misstated that in the sense that all of it is always of concern. We have to keep an eye on it. But let me also address the fact that the majority of the kids are not high risk who are on probation. They're moderate to lower risk. What's happening is that there are, so the programs that address the highest of those risk places are developing also, right? So sometimes you will see an increase in rearrests temporarily, and then they will, it will go down. And when you certainly compare it to the rearrest rate and recidivism rate of placement, this is much lower, and it's part of the process of engaging them in the community.
So this is a budget hearing, and let me ask you: you mentioned resources, right? I guess one way to address this problem would be to stop giving probation sentences to kids who are high risk. Another way, or a combination of the two, finding the right medium, would be to make sure that those kids are getting the services that they need to make sure that they're not reoffending. Is there anything in the mayor's preliminary budget that points to giving these additional resources so that these high-risk kids who are being given probation are not going to get themselves arrested again?
Well, our goal is always to be able to have the right resources and the appropriate level of intervention to the kids that need it the most to prevent that. So we're working to make sure that continues. I don't know, Michael, if you have any other.
But is there something in the budget, in the mayor's budget, that's X dollars directed towards that, or allows you to shift dollars from one thing to the other?
I mean, I think what we're seeing is the implementation of a large investment that has been made over the past year or two, and these programs are now being operationalized. So some of what was in the testimony, the new programs, the launch of PEAK, that's all new money that came into the budget. It's not in the budget as new funds now because it was already invested in, but it's just being operationalized right now. So we have a number of new programs and new resources that are just starting right now to address all of these issues.
Okay. Well, this is something that I think the council is going to watch very closely. We want juveniles to be placed in the least restrictive environments, including probation if that's appropriate, but we don't want to compromise public safety. So I find the rearrest numbers, the jump, to be concerning. Maybe they're a blip. Maybe they will get smoothed out over the course of implementing these various programs. And in the context of Mayor de Blasio's highly laudable approach to juvenile justice as it develops. But it's a statistic that I'm going to be looking at closely.
Yeah, we're definitely as well.
Thank you very much.
Yeah.